Welcome to the Learning Process by Lisa Tiernan, recorded on September 14, 2015 in Riverside, California for Education Class 6651, Teacher Leadership at Walden University. The learning process and the brain. Individual brains, like individual bodies, are different from each other, but there is almost nothing that you cannot improve or change. Brain research has taught us several things. First, that the brain is changeable, the brain is adaptable. How much the brain can change or adapt is dependent on how much the brain is used. The brain is also set up for lifelong learning. Learning process refers to the way individuals learn based on their perceptions, learning styles, and experiences. Please view the short video on teaching students to think.
We didn't know even 10 years ago that the brain was so modifiable. So even thinking in this way is so novel because it's literally been within the last 5 years that we realize your brain is the most changeable part of your whole body, and yet our whole idea of fitness stops at the neck now. We're failing our youth. It's scary, because, but it can be changed. So this whole electrochemical, neurochemical process that's going on that Dr. Smilkstein described is actually neuroengineered by when we learn something. Our brain changes moment to moment by everything we do or fail to do. So learning has the most dramatic impact. So knowing that, I think, makes us responsible for thinking, what am I doing with my brain right now? As a teacher, am I brain healthy, and am I teaching my students the best way to transform their brain? Knowing about the brain, how modifiable it is, and that the brain is very specific in terms of how I'm taught to learn information is going to build the brain. For example, if I'm teaching a brain that spits back facts, we know that works the posterior part of the brain mostly. The brain doesn't work in isolation. So when I say that, I'm speaking a little bit figuratively, because really the brain works in synergy with different parts of it. Versus, what if I ask you, rather than remember these facts, I want you to give me, in a single sentence, an abstract message, interpretation of what I just gave you. If the answer is not in the text that I've given you, we now know that works the frontal lobes. The front part of our brain is the most important part that starts very early in life. Well, when I say early in life, I'm talking about during these teenage years, college years. So teachers are literally building the frontal lobes of our youth. Are they teaching a brain that is just more of a product of here's some facts, versus a process of this is how you can do higher order thinking, critical reasoning? For teachers to think about that, that's really important, because however they teach and test is going to build that person's brain.
Let's take a look at 4 historical perspectives on learning. The first is the behaviorist theory. The most famous learning theorist behind this is Pavlov. It is the study of observable behaviors. Its purpose in education is to produce a behavioral change. The next is the cognitivist approach. Its most famous learning theorist is Jean Piaget. It focuses on internal mental processes, and its purpose in education is to develop capacity and skills to learn better. The next is the humanist approach. Its most famous learning theorist is Maslow. It is the seeking of a personal act to fulfill potential. Its purpose in education is to become self-actualized or autonomous. And lastly is the social learning theory. Its most famous learning theorist is Albert Bandura. It seeks interaction and observation in social context. And its purpose in education is full participation in communities of practice and utilization of resources. Current learning theory is brain-based learning. It is a learning theory based on the structure and function of the brain. Consists of learning-centered factors and principles. According to Dr. Alexander, these are guidelines about learners and the nature of learning. The first set is the cognitive and metacognitive factors. They are the nature of the learning process, goals of the learning process, construction of knowledge, strategic thinking, thinking about thinking, and the context of learning. The next are the motivational and affective factors. They consist of the motivational and emotional influences on learning, intrinsic motivation to learn, and the affective motivation on effort. The next are the developmental and social factors. They include developmental influences on learning and social influences on learning. And finally, the individual difference factors. These include individual differences in learning, learning and diversity, and standards and assessment. Let's take a closer look at 4 of these factors. The first is the nature of learning. Learning is most effective when it is in the intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. A classroom example would be to have students understand a concept by defining important terms. Based on this knowledge, have them create a poster or a comic strip, etc., based on that concept. Then create a further assignment tying that concept to students' previous knowledge or experience. The next is something from motivation. Intrinsic motivation is uncovered by the elimination of threats, goal setting, positive reinforcement, management of student emotions, and immediate feedback. A classroom example of this would be to create an activity where the content objective directly relates to student experiences and interests and develops their natural curiosity. The next is that learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. A classroom example of this would be to give students the opportunity to interact and collaborate with each other. Group projects, pair share, and jigsaw activities are a few examples. And finally, individual differences in learning. Students have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities. A classroom example of this is that lessons should be differentiated to meet students' cultural, linguistic, social, and intellectual differences. Diversity should be appreciated. 4 major findings of brain research. According to Dr. Patricia Wolfe, there are 4 major findings of brain research. One is that the brain is sculpted through experience. The brain sees meaningful patterns. Emotion is a catalyst for learning. And that there are 2 types of memory, procedural and declarative. How do we use these findings to help students learn? Dr. Wolfe also summarizes how these findings can help students. She states that we need to realize that everything in a classroom impacts a student's brain. All information must make sense to a student or it will not remain in the brain. Teachers need to create hands-on experiences. They need to hook new information to existing knowledge. Emotional experiences are remembered longer, and it is important to create positive emotions in the classroom. And finally, the impact of instructional technology in the learning process. Technology has the potential to increase the breadth and depth of curriculum. Technology can move students beyond classroom walls. A teacher becomes a coach or a facilitator. Technology can provide instant and accurate feedback. Technology allows assessments to be ongoing and cumulative.